Right, now we're going to have a look at this face of the headstock, because the neck is getting ready for me to do some final prep on it before I start working on the fingerboard. And the main things about this headstock, it needs to be at 90 degrees to the side of the blank, which I've already established a flat, and it also needs to be at roughly 17 degrees. So the way I do it, not everyone does it this way, is I put my workpiece in a bench vise like this, or a little bench top vise, and then I get an angle meter. There are digital ones, I use a mechanical one. I check that I've got 0 here, and that's 17 there. So that means this angle is okay. The thing is, I just need to keep checking that it stays flat. At the moment it's not flat. And I just work with the plane. I also check the angle here. So I've marked it with a pencil, and I need to take off some wood here, and especially these parts. So they are my planing guides, and I'm planing back to a line here, which is where I've worked out it will need to come. I'll start out with this, again, block plane with an adjustable mouth. It's a very nice little tool to use. Just go down, see what we've got here. Ah, blast, it moved. I need to re-establish my 0. Okay, there we are. And then I simply plane down here. You can see these nice mahogany shavings coming off, but I want to remove stock a bit faster, so I open it up a touch, lower the blade a tiny amount, and now we're getting quite thick shavings suddenly. Mahogany is very nice to plane. But if we check that, slowly we're starting to correct it. About 1 millimeter needs to come off this side. And from here, it's simply a process of planing, checking, planing again. And as I get closer, what I'm going to do is I'll switch to this plane, which is a smooth plane, and I'll try and get a perfectly flat face here. That will be my primary headstock angle. So here we are coming closer. Up here we've got an angle, where's our thing? Here we are. We've got an angle of just on 17 degrees when offset against 0 here. And we're running the smoothing plane over this very lightly now, and getting some quite light shavings. Basically, with a lot of planes, the big trick is you dial down the blade to get heavy shavings and lighten it off as you get further up. So we're very much at 90 degrees here. There's a very slight fall off here, so we just need to take off a little bit of wood. Just flatten that out. Now I just wanted to say something about truss rods. There are basically 2 types of truss rod you can put in a modern guitar. This is the traditional type. You've got an anchored point here, you've got a nut and a washer. That goes in your guitar, and as you tighten this, you can correct the bowing in the neck. The problem with it is it only goes in one direction. Also, you need to put in a curved slot. They're fun, and they actually sound good. There's less mass in the neck, and so they're supposed to increase sustain. But, in fact, these are extremely convenient. This is what they call a double action truss rod. It has a couple of major advantages. The first is that you simply route a flat channel, and I'm routing by hand, not using a power tool, so that makes a big difference. The second is that you can correct for up bow and back bow, so they're double action. Okay, it's time for some marking up and creating a truss rod channel. Now this thing is about 5.5 millimeters wide, so I've measured that, each side of my center line, and I've marked it on here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare for cutting that out. So I've clamped a ruler along the line, and I just run a blade along lightly. Don't cut too deeply, especially initially, because your blade will tend to wander. It's also a very good idea, whenever you're doing this type of work, to clamp the ruler so that the metal of the ruler is protecting the surface that you're going to be left with. Essentially, the cut should be outside the ruler, the area that you're going to cut away, and the area that you're not going to cut should be inside the ruler. Now I'm doing several passes along here, not putting on a lot of pressure in things, but just making sure that my blade is defining the edges of this channel. I'm not going to cut the whole way down the channel, obviously, but I am going to cut enough so that I've got a properly established edge. I'd say I'm cutting about 1 to 2 millimeters into the wood itself. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark some depth holes which will define things. What I do is I'm going to mark 1, 2, and at the end here 3 points on my center line. And then I'm going to put holes with a 5.5 millimeter drill into this. And what I've done, and this is how I do it, I use an Eggbeater drill, a mechanical Eggbeater drill, and basically this kind of drill guide thing. These are cheap at hardware shops. Here's a drill, here is a depth guide on the drill. You can do that with masking tape or something. And this is set up so that it goes to exactly the depth of this. As I plane away the face, that depth will change a little bit. I'll need to deepen the channel later on. But for now, here's the basic process. Let's start here in the middle. I work out where this is going to go. Put it on my awl spot. Right, we're all good. And then clamp it in place. Thusly, and simply by lowering the drill into place. There we go, that's exactly right. I just put my hole right there, drilling down at 90 degrees, checking, yep, I'm within the lines. I drill down until I hit my depth stop. There it is. Now I've got a hole that's drilled to the correct depth. Right, our truss rod channel is marked. We've got a nice clear center line. So now it's time for me to introduce and use what is essentially the single coolest tool in the world. This is something called a router plane, and I bought this one on eBay for 20 bucks or something. And essentially what you've got is a blade here and a little screw here, and what you can do is you can move the blade up and down. This is basically a chisel blade. You put it on your workpiece, you slide it along, and it takes up a curl of wood. So it's the router for people without power. Now the rules with router planes are really very simple. Basically, what you want to do is keep the cuts shallow when you start. As you go, you can deepen them gradually, but my advice is as you get towards the bottom of the channel, it's a good idea to go back to shallowness, because the shallower the cut, the more accurate it is.